Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations on Craft, where we dive into the messy and magical world of writing and demystify the publishing process. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Venetia Constantine, author of The Last Starborn Seer. Venetia read English at King's College, Cambridge, and has a PhD in art history. And she paused a very cherished career in the art world to pursue her dreams of becoming an author. And Venetia, it's so lovely to welcome you today.
So grateful that you've got me on. I'm really excited to chat to you as well.
So this is, if you're watching on YouTube, this is Venetia's wonderful, wonderful. This is an advanced reader copy, and when I first saw your cover reveal, Venetia, it is just incredible. What was it like seeing your book for the first time?
I was really grateful because I was actually allowed to have quite a lot of involvement with the cover, which I wasn't sure how much I would have going trad. That was one of the big question marks for me as somebody that's quite visual, obviously. But I had quite a lot of involvement. So I did see it, obviously, at various stages, but it was, and it is just such a beautiful cover. And I think it captures the essence of the book in a way that I'm really happy with. And I just think it's just such a beautiful first way for readers to meet my books. I'm, yeah, thrilled with it. Absolutely thrilled with it.
I can already see I'm going to end up with lots of copies because I keep seeing, like special independent bookshop copies. I'm like, and that one's beautiful too. And when they have all special things with them, so I may end up with many, many copies of your book. So we're going to start with our quick fire questions today. What is your favourite trope?
Found family.
And one bit book you wish you'd written?
The Lord of the Rings, not only because I think it's the best fantasy book ever, but actually mainly because it's so many people's comfort blanket read. And I just think that would be such a wonderful legacy to have a book that people turn to. Is that one?
I can't wait until my children are old enough to read it.
Yeah.
Your favourite book to TV adaptation?
Outlander.
Oh, that's a really good choice. I am a huge Jamie fan.
Mm.
What is your most controversial bookish opinion?
I love a love triangle.
Oh,
Not a lot of people do, but I do.
I got so many love triangle vibes enjoying your book this week.
It's a very divisive trope. I personally love them. And not because you have to choose between two, usually men, but it's because done properly, they should represent different paths for the person picking and different elements of their personality. And I always find that is what's interesting about a love triangle.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. So, we're going to begin with an insight into your writing process. And can you take us back to the very, very beginning of The Last Starborn Seer? And I know you've been living with these characters in this world for such a long time. So, can you talk us through from when it was a tiny seed to how we see it now?
I can. It's quite hard because, as you say, this is a book that's been with me basically forever. Like, I don't remember a time when it doesn't exist. So I can posit theories that it probably grew out of my love of like classic fantasy. I was somebody that read very young and I was very immersed in sort of C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Peter S. Beagle, writers like that when I was very young, Alan Garner as well. And I'm sure that that probably fed into my creation of this world, but it was just a story that I used to tell my mother on the way to school when I was like 5 or 6. I still have notebooks from when I'm about 7 where I first started writing about it. And it's just grown through with me. And then I do remember very vividly when I was probably around the same age, 6-ish, we had this black and white checkerboard floor and I was sitting looking out of a window and I just had this image pop into my head of a young woman looking out of another window, and she had this mountain behind her and it was beautiful, but she was really sad and there was this disconnect, and that was my main character. Leilani just popped into my head like that. And then it's been a very slow kind of gradual evolution of sort of building this world and these characters and these stories and sort of playing in this space for a long time. But then it wasn't until sort of 2018 that then I sat down to actually properly write it. And it's interesting because that was triggered by a really traumatic event when I was a victim of a violent armed robbery and I ended up very mentally unwell and I just sort of needed an escape. So I decided to sort of escape into this imaginary world, which had been my sort of safe space my whole life. But I think it was at that point that the character arc of having not only a world that was sort of dying and cursed and in need of healing, but a central character that was making a similar journey, those two things came together and it just poured out of me quite quickly. So yeah, it's been a very slow and then very fast process. It was a sort of, one of those situations.
Yeah, I wonder, did it need all those years of building because the world is so well developed and it has so many layers? And I wonder, is that the result of you nursing this story for so many years of your life?
I think probably yes, because it has been a very almost like a kind of natural evolution, like a bit like a sculptor taking away layers of stone to build something. Like I think, but in reverse in a way, just a very slow accretion of detailing and extra little pieces of puzzles coming together. So I think probably if that's how people, I mean, I'm sure people can do it much faster than that, but in my case, that is the way that the world was built. It began and it very slowly kind of layered up. That's what I
Yeah.
said, grew.
Wonderful.
So
I love your comparisons to the art world. I can tell you've done a PhD in art. I've heard you previously describe your process of writing, so I love your concept of the heart draft. Can you describe for everyone how many edits your book takes and how it begins?
too many. So yeah, I think it is interesting. Obviously, I do have an art background, and I do think of the way that I write a bit like an artist starting with a very messy sketch, which some might call a vomit draft. I choose to call it a heart draft because I feel like that's more self-compassionate and it makes me feel better about it. And it is a very rough but a very pure version of the story that I put down. And then slowly, I like to do lots of iterations and slowly build up layers and get to more of like a finished drawing. And then from that, get to a kind of underpainting. And it does take multiple iterations. That's all well and good until you are then on the publishing wheel and have to do things fast. And I did draft all three books very roughly before I even queried. So I have like a roadmap, but things have changed a lot. So I am in the process now of, it's probably my third or fourth draft that I will actually be handing in to my editor, even though it will be technically a first draft. But yeah, my drafts tend to be very messy. Things change a lot. And yeah, that's the way it happens. I'd like to streamline, but at the moment that's the way that works for me because I can't. I plan and I plot, but I need to write to actually find the story, and it is a process where I just need to write it and then rewrite it for it to kind of get to where I need it to be.
And also, this it's such a complex world, and you obviously it's a planned trilogy, is that correct? So you're kind of weaving story threads over three books. So it's a complex puzzle that you're working with, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think originally when I very first started in 2018 writing this properly, I actually think I thought it would be 5 books, and then it became 4 books. But then so when I'm thinking about the story, I do think of it as parts of one bigger story. Each book has its own arc, but it is like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 almost of one super story. And I just found there is something about the internal logic of a trilogy with a beginning, a middle, and an end that to me, actually, I find quite a satisfying. I think it's the reason why it's very popular. I mean, you see more duologies now, and obviously there are books which have like series that have like 11 books, but there's something about a trilogy that just does have this internal logic. And I decided that actually that was the way that was going to work best for me to make it a trilogy and to think of it as each book has its own arc. So there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to each book, but they are very much acts of one super story. So and that was why I chose to draft all three before I queried. I wanted to make sure that the story worked and that there was no massive foreshadowing that I was going to not have had time to put into book 1 that I needed for book 3, that kind of thing. So I am very much thinking of it as one story, split into 3 acts, as it were.
Yeah. As someone who struggles with one book, I am incredibly in awe of your talent to do that over a trilogy. Um, I really want to focus in on your world building, Venetia, because that's what struck me about your work, The Last Starborn Seer. Just the depth. It never felt like you were info dumping. It was kind of weaved in with your character's interiority. Can you talk us through how you developed your world building and how you make sure that it's never given to the reader in an info dumpy way? Because I just thought it was so artfully done.
It's a huge compliment because I think that is the greatest challenge of anyone writing secondary world big fantasy is trying to orientate the readers, give them the information they need without info dumping them, trying to stay with the characters and the plot. And it's a delicate balance, and it was probably the thing that took the longest in edits to try and get that balance right. Whether or not I achieved it will depend on individual readers. But in terms of the world building, I really wanted to create a world that was very otherworldly. Like it's a secondary world fantasy. It is intentionally quite fantastical with a capital F. It's a world that's created from enchanted gemstones. There are 3 moons made out of amethyst. We're talking here very high fantasy. And in a way, things that can't exist in reality. It's a microcosm of 4 realms that have entirely different climates. It's scientifically dubious. However, I think it was really important then to make sure that there was a very strong internal logic. And one of the things that I tried to do, I'm a huge Margaret Atwood fan, and I remember reading her saying that in The Handmaid's Tale, nothing was included that hadn't happened somewhere in history, because often fiction, truth is stranger than fiction, and I quite like that principle. So with my world building, I always try and ground even the most fantastical things in something real. So, for example, in Colombia, there is a river that is rainbow colored, and that's because of a type of botanical plant. I have an opaline river where it's sort of sparkling and iridescent, and that is based on a silk compound of a magical star crystal. But it's not it's sort of reality through a lens of wonder. And I think if you can try and ground things, and there isn't like a direct one-for-one correlation. So I didn't have a touchstone for each realm. I wasn't thinking, my northern realm is based on Renaissance Spain. It wasn't as simple as that, but I did try and take things that do really exist. I have a fire realm in the east where people are being forced to live underground because of climate crisis. And so I did go and look at historically cultures that have lived underground, but all the way up until the present day, with mole people being forced to live in sort of abandoned subway systems in the US. And I think that combination of real high fantasy, but based on something quite real that we can grab hold of and then feel grounded in, that's sort of the way that I approach the world building, I think.
It's wonderful. And also your prose is so visual. So I think that really helped me orientate myself within the world. I just thought it was so skillfully done, because I have read lots of high fantasy where I'm like, oh, and here comes the info dump. But it was just woven in so beautifully.
I really appreciate it, because I think that is the thing that was the hardest. It's always the hardest. It's the biggest challenge, particularly when it's like the first book and you're in a world that is nothing like our world, and you're trying to, give readers enough to orientate themselves, not too much to be overwhelmed, and try and stay with the characters. And I think one of the big ways of doing that is to try and see things through the characters' eyes. So, to try and experience the world through their lens, and then that hopefully means, and I mean, I do use art actually as a big way of giving information, the info dumps, if you like. So quite often paintings or sculptural friezes or books or things like that were used as a way to kind of to tell the reader effectively things, but in a way that wasn't just, okay, and here is somebody telling you a very long story about days gone by. And I think that is a way that I just naturally gravitated to, probably because of my art background. And there are lots of tricks like that. I think what you want to avoid doing is talking heads and having people saying things which they would already know because they live in the world. And that's, the biggest thing you want to try and avoid doing it in conversation in that kind of blocky way. But it definitely is a challenge. It's a challenge for every fantasy author. So I'm grateful that it worked for you.
There was a moment where Leilani, she comes to a mirror, and my cynical writer brain goes, oh, and here's the bit where she sees herself in the mirror and describes herself. And I just loved it, because she can't look at herself. And I love that internal angst that she has throughout the whole of the book. But I also had a really good sense of how she looked already. Also, you've commissioned quite a lot of character arts. Would you like to talk us through the character art, and also how you developed your characters as a writer?
Yes, I love character art. I mean, obviously, I come from an art background. I worked with old masters, but also living artists. And it was actually one of the artists that I met. She wasn't one of my gallery artists, but I met her during my gallerist days. And she just had a very ethereal style. She did a lot of kind of mythological based paintings. And I just thought it would be a perfect match. So I approached her before I had an agent, when I was actually considering self-publishing. And I just decided I really wanted to get character art. In my kind of dreams, I was thinking, I love illustrated fantasy, particularly that we're seeing more adult fantasy illustrated again. And I was like, I'd love to have them in the book itself, just because I think it fantasy lends itself to that visual medium so well. It just brings readers in. It makes everything come to life. So over a period of years, we worked on these 14 character portraits that have quite a large cast. That's the kind of core cast. And it was just such a joy, because obviously it is very much her interpretation. It's not necessarily canonical, but I was able to give feedback and to be involved in that process more than I will with any other art. So that was a wonderful, joyful thing. And then since then, I've also commissioned many other artists, and it's just one of my favorite things. I'm already thinking about what I'm commissioning for book 2, because I just think, I love seeing my world and my characters come to life. And I think for readers, it's such a good way of kind of bringing them into what the book is like, hopefully. And then in terms of building the characters, again, tough question, because so many of them have been with me for a long time. But I think I do always start with, okay, the obvious things I think you're told to do, sort of what do they want and why can't they get it? And that kind of internal flaw or self misperception that's going to be driving them and causing conflict for them. And then because this is an ensemble cast, I was also thinking about them kind of in tandem. So, for example, Leilani is a character that is very much filled with self-loathing. She is very uncomfortable in her own body. She is very afraid of her own body. She's sort of like a lot of shame culture for her. And I have another character called Maris, who is much more of a foil to that. She is somebody who is body confident, who is just confident generally. And I think trying to get characters, because this is a found family at its heart, who are going to kind of complement but challenge each other and show different aspects of how life can be lived. So I was thinking about them individually, but then also very much as a group when I was building those characters out.
I felt that very clearly reading the characters, that I quickly knew exactly what they wanted, and kind of their passion and how they went about things. It was wonderful to read. You've created such a complex world, and when I was reading the ending, I thought, how has she achieved this? So you've made the Last Starborn Seer so satisfying in itself, but yet already I want book 2 right now, Venetia. So how did you balance crafting the ending in particular, because it is part of a trilogy?
So I think, as I said, I did think of it as its own story as well. So there is, they begin a quest and they end a quest. And that part, and the Leilani begins with a goal, and that goal is addressed by the end of the book. So there is a sense of satisfaction. However, I always knew that the ending was going to blow open a lot of things that you think, the things you've been led to believe are factual are kind of exploded at the end of the book. And there's a big cliffhanger, there's a big twist, there's a big revelation. And that was always going to be there, because I think the point of a second book in a trilogy is to kind of explode open for me. I think you want to see everything get bigger. You want the stakes to increase. You want everything to just expand, ideally in a second book of a trilogy. And for me, that means moving into different parts of the world, but also getting new characters. And like I say, this kind of spin of what you've been led to believe, which was also just a big theme for me. The idea that history is not always truth and it always serves a specific agenda. And actually there's more at play than might be superficially believed. And so, yeah, I always knew what the ending would be. And then, like I say, I do always think of, there is always a sort of character arc that I'm working with for each book that is its own story and that will resolve, so that there is a feeling of resolution of some kind, but then that sort of switch and change. And ultimately, obviously, the last book will be the sort of book that really hopefully brings things to a kind of full circle, bigger sense of completion, hopefully. But I think they're always the challenge, because you need to stick that landing, which is always a big challenge with a trilogy, I think.
Yeah. And wonderfully answered without any spoilers. You did a great job there.
Trying my best.
So, can we move on to your journey to publication and how you found your agent?
Yes. So I, as I say, wasn't sure I was going to query at all, was quite seriously considering self-publishing. And I had all the books sort of semi-ready in case I needed to do like a more of a rapid fire release. I had all the artwork, I had a map commissioned. And then I'd done a few writing courses. And as part of that, I got to be included in an anthology that went out to a bunch of agents. And I said yes, sent off my stuff. And it was months went by before they actually sent them out. I'd completely forgotten about it. And it went out, and quite quickly I had multiple agent requests. The issue being that at that point, the book was a different book and it was very long. And I knew it was way too long, but I still sent it off. I'd also been applying to a bunch of writing competitions at this stage, and I'd placed in one which had been judged by a literary agent, and they'd also requested it. So I had this sense that, okay, there was some agent interest now. And they got back to me, the ones who'd requested, and said what I expected them to say, which is, this is very long. Can you make it shorter? And then I'd love to see it again because I love this. And I thought to myself, can I make it shorter? Because at that stage, the book was actually dual POV, but it was different POVs. It had 2 timelines. It was an amazing version of the book, I think, but it was very complicated and very long. And I decided that I would remove the prequel timeline, leave that as a mystery that you kind of uncover through the trilogy as a whole, and just take it down to Leilani's story. And that's what I then did. And then it was at a length which I could query. And because I'd had an interest, I decided to query. I queried for a few months. I got quite a lot of interest, but it was actually when I went to the Jericho Writers Festival and I did a few agent one-to-ones, and I was saying to them, well, I've had kind of multiple full requests, but it's all gone a bit quiet. I don't really know what's going on. And they said, well, have you let them know that you've been having, and I was like, no, because I was told not to do that until, you had an offer. And they said, no, you should be telling them. Anyway, I went back from that conference and they'd all the ones that I'd done one-to-ones with also requested. So again, I had this sense there was something here that was interesting to agents. I went back, I sent out the kind of, by the way, just to let you know, it has been requested by other people. And then it just was a bit like a feeding frenzy. It went quite quickly after that point. And I ended up with a lot of full requests. And I think in the end, 4 offers from agents. I went with the one that I felt was the best match for me. And then it's been a wonderful decision as well. He's been an incredible agent, so I'm very happy, and that's how that happened.
So you had 4 agents interested. Could you talk us through the calls and how you made that decision? I imagine it's an incredibly difficult decision to make.
So I actually met most of them face to face. One I did do a call with because it came in very late. The others I did meet face to face, and it was interesting. I think with the first agent, I went with the first agent that offered, and with him, I sent it to him. He'd immediately requested it. He'd stayed up all night reading it. He'd asked for a meeting the next day, and he was just incredibly passionate. He was also an agency that I knew and respected, that had authors that I really admired. And I just had a very good feeling about him as a person and about what he was offering in terms of author care and in terms of longevity of my career if I wanted to move into different kinds of books. All the things that I wanted, he was offering me. I did, though, do the thing that you're supposed to do and let everyone that had requested the book know that I had representation. And those that offered, I did, and they, within the time frame that were able to offer in the time frame, I did also meet. And to be honest, the second agent who I met with, again in person, we talked for maybe 2-3 hours. I could have spent all day with her. She was absolutely lovely, but she wanted me to make some changes to the book that I just didn't feel were quite what I wanted to do. And it wasn't a forced thing. She was like, I'll still take you on anyway. But I just think the direction she wanted to take the book wasn't what I had in mind. And she was also a very established agent, but had loads and loads of clients. And I just felt that if things didn't go well on sub, I wasn't so convinced that I would remain a top priority just because there were so many huge authors. Even though as a person, I absolutely loved her. And I think she would have been an incredible agent. It was really hard. Between those two, it was really hard. The other agencies were much bigger agencies with the kind of film arms and all that kind of, but I personally wanted to be with a smaller agency that felt more like a family and that had really good author care. And that was really important to me. So even though some of the other offers were in a way flashier, I just didn't get the same feeling in my soul about being looked after in the way that I wanted to be looked after. And it really did come down to a gut feeling. And then I went and had another meeting with the wider agency to meet the whole rest of the agency with the one that I ended up going with. I'd already kind of decided that I was going to take this offer, but I went in, and again, it was just that feeling of this is the right place for me. I feel like I'm going to be well taken care of here. And so that's where I went.
Wonderful. So it sounds like the editorial vision was hugely important to you.
It was, although I would also say that actually my agent is not particularly editorial at all. In fact, we did almost no edits before we went out on sub. We did a couple of line level tweaks, like 2 or 3, and then sent it off. He is very much of the opinion that if a book is ready, and they usually do tend to take on books that are readier, it's very important to leave space for editorial vision, which I actually think is true. And I did end up making big changes with my editor. But quite a lot of editors want to see what they will do with a book as well. And so I think his gut instinct there was very good. So yeah, he's got a great eye and is very quick at reading and is brilliant in that way. But actually it was more that what I didn't want to do is I think other agents wanted me to take it down a much more romantasy route. They wanted me to sex everything up a lot. And that wasn't my vision for the book. And so I think it wasn't being forced upon me, but I just think it was a particular vision for the book that wasn't one that I necessarily shared. In terms of positioning more than editorial vision, I think it was about positioning for me.
Yeah, very specific career path, isn't it?
I think it was just you could take my book down that it has a lot of romance, and it definitely could. I could have added a lot more kind of spicy scenes, and I could have put the focus that way. But I think really for me, this was a fantasy first book with a big romance subplot that's very integral. But it just my touchstones when I was thinking about writing it were, like I say, classic fantasy, or that kind of new generation of female-led fantasy, like the kind of Samantha Shannon, Laini Taylor's, that kind of book that was not necessarily kind of romantasy proper. Although I love romantasy proper and I read loads of it and I really enjoy it, that just wasn't the story that I was quite intending to tell with this trilogy. So I feel like I could have changed it down that direction, but it just wasn't what I really wanted to do with it.
Yeah. I feel so many writers are familiar with how you get an agent. Can you give us an insight into that next step of the submission process and what it's like for an author to be out on submission?
I think it's really important to say that every submission journey is entirely different. And I think with querying, there's a sort of commonality, but actually with submission, it's very wide ranging. So in my case, as I say, we made very few edits and we went out on sub almost immediately, which is actually not that normal. Most people will probably spend a few months editing, longer even sometimes. We went out on submission very quickly, and I also got an offer very quickly. So it was within a few days I was being called into a meeting with Head of Zeus, and that was also something I wasn't expecting. I actually went in before an offer was made to meet the editor and editorial team to discuss their vision for the book and whether that was something that I was interested in, because it was choosing to add Astrofel's POV was something. It wasn't, I don't know if it would have been a flat out no, but that was something that they were quite keen on and asked me how I would feel about, and I was very receptive to that idea. And I really liked my editor. And again, she had the same vision for it was about positioning. Her vision for the book was the same as mine. And I think that was really important to me. She understood what I was trying to write, and that's how she was positioning it. And so, but that was something that my agent felt was really important, that I meet my editor in person first and see whether, because you have to be able to work with them. So I did that. Again, not every author will do that, but that's how it happened for me. And then it went to acquisitions, and then I got the news a couple of weeks later that they had offered for the book. And so it was all quite fast, which again isn't necessarily normal. Like, there's no right or wrong. I know people who've been on submission for over a year and then end up with incredible deals. Sometimes it's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. I found it better than querying, because you have an ally, you have an agent who is in your corner, you have a champion. It's not like shouting into the void. But mine was quite short. And I will say that even though I was only on submission for a short period of time, when I was querying, I was able to do other stuff, write other books and do other things. When I was on submission, it was all consuming. It was very much like I just couldn't think about anything else. The stakes felt very high, because I guess this was like the end. Is it going to happen? And it is scary in the same way that querying is scary. You just never really know. But like I say, I think the important thing about being on submission is that each journey is different, and there's no oh, if it doesn't happen quickly, that's a bad sign. It isn't. It just really is about somebody falling in love with your manuscript and needing to be able to convince sales that it's a marketable choice as well, because it's a two-pronged. They have to love it and they have to think they can sell it, and those two things don't always go hand in hand. So yeah.
Did your agent accompany you with this meeting?
Yeah, so he came with me, and I was my editor and the editorial assistants in the first instance, and we just sat down and had a hour-long chat or so about the book and about why they loved it and about what their visions would be. And I think it was more to see, was I going to be somebody that they could work with as well? Am I going to be an author that's going to be willing to take notes, and sort of how is that dynamic going to work? And I think it was to give them as much information to then go to the sales meeting, the acquisitions meeting, with as much as they could to sort of sell it, basically, because that is what they do in those acquisition meetings. They have to try and convince everybody. But yeah, I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. Actually, it was a really nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, how incredible. Moving on to your advice for writers, what would you say improved your craft?
Okay, so obvious things like reading. Every writer should be reading, and reading in your genre and outside of it, actually, both. But I think, have a good sense of what your genre is. And then obviously reading outside can be really good for lots of different reasons. So read a lot, but also read critically, and ideally find other writers and do critique work. I think that is the most important thing. When you read with a critical eye, reading other writers' writing and feedback on it, and you learn so much about your own work from doing that. I think that's crucial. Find community. Community is so important it's a hard slog. And I think having community who understand what you're going through is really important. And improves your craft, just talking to other writers, being around other writers. I did do some writing courses, and I did, read a lot of craft books and do things like that. And I think all of that helps. But the biggest thing, and, entering competitions, I think was a good thing too. But I would say it is that doing feedback on other writers' work. I think that is the quickest way to level up your own writing. I really do.
Yeah, you've been such a generous beta reader for so many people, Venetia.
I love doing it, and I'm kind of sad that I don't get to do it as much anymore, and increasingly it's difficult because I just don't have time right now, particularly because publishing wheel is quick. But it's something that, in the future I really enjoyed, like, when I've been able to mentor other writers, and I've had a few opportunities to do that. Like, I actually do love it because it's just really nice to be able to see how you can help someone's writing and give that feedback. And it's, I know how much I need external opinion. You can't do it for yourself. You do sometimes just need that external voice of encouragement, but also, like, if you just tried this will make it. And sometimes it's just that little bit of advice that just makes things click. And I really love that. So I hope to go back to it sometime.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. If you could go back to when you first started writing The Last Starborn Seer, what would you say to yourself?
Do you know what's a funny thing? I actually loved all of it. Like, the actual part of just when it was just me and my story, there were moments, of course, of huge self-doubt and feeling like it was never going to go anywhere. But I think because I sort of took that pressure off myself. I was never writing with the goal to being published, or if I was, I really was like, I can do this myself and it will get out into the world in whatever way. And because I felt that, I think there was never the stress attached to it. And so that time of just me and the writing and growing as a writer and learning how to write was actually a kind of magical time. So I'm not sure that I would ever, like, I don't think I would go back and tell myself, because I wasn't unhappy in that time. It was actually quite a magical, wonderful time for me. I mean, I think would I go back, I would just say what I always said to myself at the time, which was really just trust everything is going to be okay. And if, the story will get out into the world, and it has. And I kind of was always saying that to myself. That was always in my mind. So I'm not sure, like, I think I really, really loved all that early time. I enjoyed it so much. So I don't necessarily feel like I want to go back and change or say anything to that person.
Yeah.
I say, well
Wonderful.
done. You worked really hard. Well done. Well done for doing it and for sitting up and making it work when the kids were small and everything else. I
Yeah,
am proud of myself for doing that and working hard.
that's a great answer. What's it like writing under contract? How have things changed? You've spoken a little bit about timescales. Can you talk us through the changes now?
Timescale is one. I think one of the hardest things as well is that you're doing multiple things at the same time. So you'll be in the middle of drafting and that's all happening, and then suddenly copy edits will land. And it's that shifting between modes, or you need to do some promo. And it's that shifting between modes that I really struggle with, particularly because I am a mum of 3 and my life is already very chopped up. And I find it quite hard mentally, and I'm not there yet. We need to learn how to be able to adapt and sort of to get out of a hardcore, very quick turnaround on copy edits, and then to try and get back into drafting has been really challenging. That's something I need to get better at. And then the other thing, which is a big change, is obviously now, and particularly right now, because the book is now with ARC readers and obviously it's about to go out into the world, it is very different knowing that people are reading it, and in quite a public way. And I think this is something which I am just beginning to learn to navigate. And it's not an easy thing. I think it's one of the hardest things, having your work available for public critique, and as the author then sharing space with readers and reviewers. And this is a new thing. And it, like, Waterstone's website, Amazon website, all these places that you would never have really, you just went onto. Now you can see and receive, whether you want to or not, feedback about your work. And navigating that whilst trying to draft new books, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for me going forwards, because it's definitely not easy. It's not something you can kind of prepare for. And you have to just accept that, however brilliant a book may or may not be, it can't be for everybody, and trying to understand that just because it may not work for one particular reader, it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the book. And as a people pleaser, that's really a challenge. That's going to be my biggest challenge. And I think that is, for me, the hardest part about being on contract, is you need to get work out whilst all the noises in your head and, promo and marketing and all the rest of it. And that the juggle is the hardest thing, I would say.
Yeah. So will you read your reviews, Venetia? I have spoke to writers who don't read reviews at all.
I began not reading them at all. And then you get a bit curious, or you see some lovely ones and you think, oh, I'll just have a little look. And in general, they have all been amazing. But the thing is, we have a negativity bias in our bodies. It's a trauma response. And somebody that has PTSD, I have a very heightened one. So you can have 20 amazing reviews and one not so brilliant one. And that is the one that you will carry with you. And so I think what I have learned about myself recently is that reviews just really aren't a safe space for me, even the positive ones, because they get in my head. And say someone absolutely loves the way I do one thing, and let's say I'm planning to change that in the next book, it's in there. So even the positive reviews, it's like, oh, you're going to start doing more of it because people, like, as a people pleaser, you will want to try and. So I think to try and stay true to my artistic vision, not looking at reviews is actually the only way I'm going to be able to do it. So I think I had a brief little look And I think now I am blocking all the review sites and just, it is also not for us. They are intended for readers,
Yes,
to
yeah.
help other readers. And it's so subjective. I mean, I used to think that you could look at reviews and kind of get a bit of a sense of, maybe ways to improve your writing. I just don't think that it works like that, because every opinion is so polarized. If you tried to do that, you would end up with a very choppy style of writing, because you'd be trying to please people who you shouldn't be, because they're not your intended readership. And I think it's just a slippery road to get down. So I think I'm going to do what every writer told me to do and just not look at them, and trust that my team are there checking them. And if there was a serious issue or something that needed flagging, they'll tell me.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And what's it like the next steps for you? So the last Starborn Seer is published the 5th of March. It's coming out very, very soon. And you're about to go out into the world to meet lots of readers. What is it like meeting those readers? I know you went to Yalc recently, didn't you? And people have started to interact. And
It's the best thing ever. It's the best thing ever. Like, I love meeting readers. Everyone has been so supportive as well. Like, the amount of support that's been there for me and for this book is just incredible. And Yalc was just mind blowing. And it's just been so lovely and so heartening. And that part is my favorite, particularly because I think the book does deal with some big themes like generational trauma and anxiety and things like that. So I get a lot of readers who really respond to those themes, and then will, come up and just say really amazing things to you, and you have this connection through words, which is what I wanted most as a storyteller. And so that part of it is the part that I just can't wait to do more of. And yeah, I'm so excited to go on tour and actually get to celebrate release week with people all over the UK. It's going to be amazing.
and it's such a Tolkien-esque book. I've seen it compared a number of times to Tolkien. It's just incredible. And to be compared to such a wonderful writer, because your world building is so strong. So I can't wait for lots more readers to read it and come and visit you on your tour.
I mean, it's one of those things where I love Tolkien. I am a huge, huge fan. And obviously, I would never want to position myself as like the next Tolkien ever, because I think he is the greatest of all time for a reason. But it is the hugest compliment if people feel that sense of, because I just love his books because it is like escaping into this other place. And it is so wondrous and kind of, yeah, I think, my books, probably the characters are a little bit more messed up, and they are quite a lot of products of trauma. His characters, I think, are a little less. That is a bit more of a, I think his characters are probably slightly less morally grey than mine are. But it is a huge compliment. I don't know that I would ever claim it for myself.
Yeah, just to clarify, Venetia didn't say this about herself.
No, Venetia did not say it for herself, but as somebody that has always loved his work so much, like, it is the highest compliment I could ever be paid. So I'm, if anyone feels that way, I am very grateful.
You said once, and it's something that has stayed with me for a long, long time, that there's no difference between an aspiring writer and a writer, and you're still the same writer as you were before your book deal and before you got an agent. What advice would you give to, I won't say aspiring writers, but to writers who are struggling to break into the industry?
So I hate the term aspiring writer. I think if you write, you're a writer. And I think that is the first thing I would say to everybody. Claim that space. You're a writer, you're writing. And there is no difference. There was no difference from the book that I was querying, thinking, oh God, is it terrible? Is anyone ever going to like it, to the book that then got taken by an agent that then got a book deal? It was exactly the same book. In my case, exactly the same, because we didn't even make edits. It was literally the same manuscript. And I do think that taking up space and feeling like you can be part of, because I feel like a lot of times people feel that there's this boundary, and I understand why they do, but I think the sooner that you can just sort of claim the title of writer and go forward with that mentality, I think the better, because it is true. If you're writing, you're a writer. And the biggest advice I would give to anyone trying to, I think you have to be honest with the fact that it's a hard industry to break into. And I think the important thing is that it's not a meritocracy. It's so much of it is luck and chance. And I think it can feel very much like, if it doesn't happen, if you query and it doesn't work out, or if you're on sub and it doesn't work out, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you and your work. And that just isn't the case. It is so many other factors at play. And that's hard because but it's so true. And I think that's another thing. I think it's just, obviously you can always learn and improve. Every writer can, but I think sometimes it can feel like it's something wrong with you, and actually it's just market or oversaturation or luck, So I think, yeah, holding true to your work and keep writing the next thing. Don't stop. That's the most important thing. Don't stop. Just keep going. If you believe in it enough, keep going. Yeah.
And for your future, obviously, we have books 2 and 3 in the process.
Yeah.
Um, what are you hoping to achieve as a writer? Do you have other projects long term?
A really interesting question, and one that I'm thinking about at the moment. So, this is a very big world, and like I say, it did have a prequel timeline once, and that story does sort of exist, and I would love to tell that story. And there's a few spin-off stories. So this story is complete in 3 books, but there are other stories in this world I would really like to tell, but that's going to very much depend on how readers respond to it and whether or not there's an appetite. I can definitely see a time that I would write those stories for myself anyway. But whether or not that will be the next thing I will do will depend on how this is received. If not, I have got other things that I have brewing. And I do think I want to take it by ear. Like, I need to see how I cope with the publishing schedule and balancing that with family life. I need to see how I cope with being more public, and how I cope with having readers respond to my work. And I think these are things that you can't really know until it happens. So I think for me, I'm very focused on getting this trilogy out the best it can be, because this really is my heart book. And if I could only ever tell one story, I'm just so glad it's this one. And I want to do it as best I can with my own limitations as a human being. So that's where my focus is right now. And I think it's going to depend. I hope to tell more stories because I love it, but it's going to just depend on so many factors. So I'm not really thinking too far forward because I do have another 2 books to come.
Wonderful. Venetia, thank you so much for your time today. If we want to purchase your book, find you online, what is the best way to reach out?
Online, I'm on Instagram and I'm pretty active on there. I did start a TikTok, but I'm just not using it. So if you want me on social media, I'm on Instagram, and I love to have people there. I really enjoy connecting. So Instagram, and in terms of buying the book, it's available really everywhere. So all the obvious places: Amazon, Waterstones. We also do have an indie pre-order running at the moment with a lot of independent bookshops. All details are on my Instagram, and obviously I love to support indie bookshops too. And then in the US and across the world, it's all links are on my site. But basically, anywhere good books are bought, you can find it.
Venetia, best of luck with your tour, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you so much.